Dr. Jeff talks love. Dr. Jeff talks life. Answers your questions, cuts through the strife. Sex and intimacy, real and true. Evidence-based, made just for you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dr. Jeff Talks About Sex and Intimacy, the podcast where we have honest, evidence-based conversations about sexual health, about relationships, and the many ways we can connect with ourselves and with others. I'm your host, Dr. Jeffrey Albaugh, clinical nurse specialist, certified sexuality counselor, researcher, and author. Whether you're listening live or catching the replay, I just want to thank you for being here. My hope is that every episode leaves you with practical knowledge, greater understanding, and perhaps a new way of thinking about intimacy and sexual well-being. This is episode 81, Sexual Behavior Analysis, a New Frontier in Sexology. Whether you're joining us live or whether you're listening later on your favorite podcast platform, thank you for being here. I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your precious life. We are out there. We are on all of the platforms. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. We're on X. We're on LinkedIn. A quick favor, if you are a Facebook person, follow us. The more people who follow us, the more we can do on Facebook. So please be a follower on Facebook. And we thank all of our people who watch or follow. Visit the website. Boy, you can watch all of those amazing past guests and episodes. They're all on there. You can pull up the calendar and see all of our great programming all the way through October and what's coming up next. So go to the website. Boy, we are everywhere you are. We are streaming on iHeartRadio. We're on Amazon Music and Spotify. Why? Because now when you work out, you can learn about sex and intimacy. When you're on the road, you and your love can learn all about how to improve your relationship. Take us with you. We're there. We're streaming live, and you can also listen to all the recorded versions as well. As always, I'd like to just take a moment to welcome you here. Whatever your sexual orientation, whatever your gender identity or relationship style, this space and this place were created for you. This is a place for you, and you are so welcome. So what's the mission of the podcast? It's super simple. It's to empower and enlighten you with evidence-based information that you need to improve your sexual health and deepen your relationships so you can live your one fabulous, miraculous, wholehearted life with more love. Who doesn't want more love? Today's conversation introduces an exciting and emerging area of sexology that offers a unique perspective on why we behave the way we do sexually. So interesting. And more importantly, how understanding how those patterns can help us create healthier, more satisfying, intimate lives. We all want more of that. Have you ever wondered why some sexual habits or reactions or relationship patterns seem so difficult to change? We seem like we're rooted or stuck in them. Why insight alone isn't always enough to create lasting formation. Sometimes you may have some insights, but you may not know what to do. While traditional sex therapy often explores thoughts, emotions, and relationships, another emerging discipline is asking a different question. What can we learn by carefully examining behavior itself? So interesting. Today's guest is helping pioneer an exciting area known as sexual behavior analysis, an emerging subfield of sexology that applies the science of behavior to understanding sexual health, desire, intimacy, and relationships. Rather than focusing only on why people think or feel certain ways, sexual behavioral analysis explores how behaviors are learned, how they're maintained, and changed using well-established principles of behavior science. So this is going to be a great episode. Boy, I am so excited to welcome back one of my previous favorite guests, Nicholas Maio-Aether, who's a behavior scientist, a certified sexologist, licensed behavior analyst, and a marriage and family therapist whose work bridges fields of behavior analysis and human sexuality. Pretty cool. He is among a growing group of professionals advancing sexual behavior analysis. And we talked about how that's an emerging subfield of sexology that applies those principles of behavioral science to better understand sexual behavior, intimacy, relationships, and sexual well-being. Well, Nicholas works with individuals and couples experiencing a wide range of sexual concerns, helping clients identify learned behavior patterns and develop practical, evidence-based strategies that promote healthier, more fulfilling, intimate lives. That's what our clients really want. His clinical philosophy emphasizes compassion, curiosity, one of my favorite words, and collaboration, while recognizing the unique experiences, identities, and goals of every one of his clients. Nicholas is amazing, and I am so excited to welcome you, Nicholas, to this episode and the podcast. Dr. Jeff Talks About Sex and Intimacy. Welcome back, my friend.
Thank you so much. And what a lovely introduction. Thank you.
Gosh, I am so excited about your topic. So I'm going to jump off and let you take control of the wheel, and it's going to be all you. Can't wait to hear your presentation.
Thank you. Okay, everybody. Well, I've been given this hour to talk about the subfield that I've been helping grow. And as already mentioned, it is sexual behavior analysis. A little bit about who I am. My gosh, a lot of that already got covered, but just to real quickly note, I own Empowered, a Center for Sexuality, which is a sexuality agency that's focused entirely in behavior analytic principles and how to use those to empower and affirm people all across sexuality and gender spectrums. I won't spend too much time on myself, but as you can see, I do have a bit of a playful side. I was trained in sex therapy. I was also trained in marriage and family therapy. I opted to remain licensed as a behavior analyst and to practice through the behavior analytic scope in moving forward. So I am going to just move us through and note that I am a nerd, I'm a scientist, and I'm also a clinician. And so this may seem a little preachy, it may seem a little pedantic. I have worked to try and keep it from being like that. But I also want to really point out that I am not here to try and sell anybody on behavior analysis or its applications towards sexuality, because we've had a lot of problems historically in our field, and I'm actually going to cover that. I have some slides about that, and I'm not going to try and deny it. What I think is we should own any of our bad history. We should learn from it, and we should move forward, because if something has value, we don't leave it behind just because bad actors were using it. I do have some objectives, even though this isn't an actual formal training, but I want to make sure that across this hour, you're aware of what you're getting. So we're going to look at what sexual behavior analysis is and the types of concerns it can be applied towards. We're going to look at how it started out as a very rough subfield that was not empowering or affirming at all, and how it has moved across time. And then we will also be looking at the differences between sexual behavior analysis and sex therapy, because they are different. And I think that both have incredible value, sometimes overlapped, but often for slightly different things. I am obviously not there to try and make you stay, but please don't think that you have to. If you want to turn this off, you want to take a break, you want to look away, you do what you need to. Everybody should be taking care of themselves, and we all kind of have our own way of doing that. So it's not up to me to dictate that by any means. There may be times where I do say some graphic things. I'm not going to be showing anything pornographic on my slides. And every now and then I do, without intent, make a statement that goes against a faith system's beliefs. So I just want to highlight that I have my own faith system, I have my own beliefs, but at least when I am in the role of a behavior analyst, I try and put behavior analysis at the forefront more than any of my personal belief frameworks. And so let's get looking. What is SBA? What is this? Well, first we got to look at what ABA is, because SBA is a subfield of ABA. So ABA, applied behavior analysis, was initially developed in the 60s and then was followed up in an article by Bear, Wolf, and Risley in 1987, where they define ABA. But when we talk about like what most people think of when they think of ABA, most people are thinking of sitting across the table from a kid diagnosed with autism. So you've got autistic kids, and that's really what this is. And that it's very simple. It's do this, you'll get a reward. Do this, you'll get a reward. And so I hear a lot that ABA is children's autism therapy that looks like dog training. And gosh, that's a reductive view. And also it has looked like that at times. So I want to just note that that's not the scope, but it has looked like that at times. Not in my work, and we'll get moving forward about that. But ABA is really just the science of how environment impacts behavior, and then how behavior impacts environment. Sex therapy is often very based in systems theory, and so is behavior analysis. We recognize that everything within a system is constantly punishing or reinforcing, and thus shaping everything else. So in ABA versus other schools of mental health and behavioral health, the focus is going to be more on what can be seen. We look at tangible behavior, but that doesn't mean that we don't recognize that thoughts and feelings exist. We even actually have a framework for that. It's called acceptance and commitment. In psychotherapy, they call that acceptance and commitment therapy. In behavior analysis, we call that acceptance and commitment training. Either way, it came from behavior analysis. So what are some other areas that people are using ABA that's not just sitting across the table from autistic kids, point here, do that? Well, there is actually the analysis of animal behavior. So there is behavior training that does look very much like animal training. But that is not the totality of the field either. There's forensic behavior analysis, behavioral gerontology, which overlaps with the work in sexuality a lot. Same with behavioral wellness and life coaching, clinical behavior analysis. There's everything on this list that you can see. And of course, sexual behavior analysis. So what actually makes something behavior analysis then? Why aren't we just calling ourselves therapists? Why aren't we considering this psychotherapy? Well, it's interesting because what I do sometimes looks like psychotherapy. And I've been told that since what I'm doing doesn't look like sitting across a table from somebody and making them point to things or select things, that I'm not doing real ABA. Because I'm not focusing on trying to mitigate the symptoms of autism, that this isn't real ABA. But the reality is ABA is anything that meets very basic criteria, get a cab and the assumptions of science. Oops. So the get a cab stands for generalized, effective, technological, applied, conceptually systematic, analytic, and behavioral. They're basically just dimensions. And they overlap with a lot of things other people do in therapy. But we have to have all 7 of those dimensions present, and we have to follow the assumptions of science, particularly the notion of parsimony, which means keeping things super simple, sometimes overly reductive, admittedly, and also philosophic doubt. We don't just trust our first instinct, and we don't. And this is where we do sometimes differ from traditional therapists. We don't always trust that the client knows what's best for the client. And that's an area that things have gotten really heated in debate and discussion. But at the end of the day, if you look at the literature, I cannot say that behavior analysts truly believe and consistently follow what their client says. Oftentimes it's going to be a mix of what the client says and what the data shows. So sexual behavior analysis is taking that and applying it specifically towards sexual and sociosexual behavior. And it's not an official subfield. There's no, quote, white paper or something out there that is defining the specific standards. But we have a group of people within our field who were fighting against its history, who were fighting for it to be a more affirming area, and for us to recognize that sexuality was being addressed by people who did not have sexological competencies. They didn't know what they were doing. So we got together and we combined a lot of our foci. We looked at the literature that was out there. We've been disseminating at conferences, and we as a group have kind of come together and developed minimum competency standards. And so we have started moving forward with technologies, which means ways that we can approach things and treatments. And so just like any other behavior analysis, we do start with a functional behavior assessment. And what that means is that we meet with our clients and we make sure that they know what is coming, they know what our science is, and that they can tell us what their problems are. From there, we're going to take data though, and we're going to look at if we change something in your environment, how does that shift how you are responding? And that doesn't just mean changing like where a chair is in your room. That means changing how your partner responds to you or how you respond to your partner. This is something like if you are having initiation avoidance, you're telling us that's the issue, initiation avoidance. My partner, he never initiates sex. And then I have you and your partner together, and your partner, every time he tries to talk, you're talking over him or you're punishing his efforts. I'm going to take data on that. And while you're saying that your partner is not initiating and your partner is the problem, I'm also recognizing that you are effectively punishing your partner anytime he is attempting to do something, which might generalize over to him feeling very punished in any efforts to initiate sex. And if you're already in this assessment, punishing and shutting down any of his attempts to initiate within assessment, you're probably also shutting down attempts to initiate sex or have historically. And so we start looking at all of those pieces of the dynamic, and we look at everything in the environment, including the individuals and their behavior. And we look at what can be tweaked. How can we help you access positive reinforcement? How can we help you grow in a way that feels good? And since all behavior serves a function, if you're pointing out that your partner isn't initiating and what you're doing is kind of shutting them down, I want to point out that that behavior is counterintuitive to the function you're trying to achieve, which is initiation. Now, one of the neat things about SBA versus sex therapy is that behavior analytic technologies and the treatment models and the way that we are trained in our field is very much designed to be able to be generalized and brought across different populations, particularly also populations with physical and or intellectual disabilities. And this is where we can break down a task in ways that a lot of people are not trained to do. And we can find from a person's baseline whether they have spinal cord injury and now they can no longer feel their penis. Or this person has intellectual disability, and while he has capacity to consent, he's not able to really understand the concept of flirting. I can get in there and I can help assist from baseline to your desired goal. And if your desired goal is something that is physiologically or sociologically not going to happen for you, then we can work on acceptance and try and find that kind of middle ground and get you towards a goal that is going to be satisfying for you. So when working with clients who have intellectual disability, developmental disabilities, or really impactful autism, we teach things and we use a therapeutic teaching method, things like public and private, consent. And I'm going to be honest, a lot of my clients who don't have intellectual disability still need the consent education, particularly the recognition component. And then also that speaking up and denying consent. I think a lot of us get shaped into really believing that we can't speak up for ourselves, or that if we've already started this, or they've already paid for this meal, or they got all dressed up and like all of this went into it. Now I have to put out. Oh my goodness. That in it of itself is a skill we need to learn, to not just believe this script that we have to have sex. We teach flirting versus harassment, and I actually bring in HIPAA-trained actors to role play and to work with. And before I came into this podcast today, I spent an hour and a half working with 2 different actresses who were working with the different guys in my group, and they're trying to flirt. And it was just really cool to watch them actually access skills and be reinforced and get good outcomes. And then if they make a mistake, it's safe, because we're doing this in a contrived environment where I can control the environmental reactions. I can tell her, hey, I want you to pause. Okay, now freeze. And we can analyze her face. And this is something that, again, with neurotypical couples, I actually will do sometimes in a session where I'll say, I want you to just pause, hold your facial expression. I want you to turn, you're looking at me, turn and look at your partner. What you see on your partner's face right now, if you see this is a sign of X. And we can really talk about that and get in depth when it comes to those tangible behaviors and what they actually represent on that more intangible internal level. We teach about solo sex or masturbation and help these individuals get access to it. And I think that that's a huge thing, excuse me, where we have a lot of individuals with disabilities in group homes or other dayhab settings, and they're getting into trouble for engaging in sexual behavior with peers or attempting it with staff. And I'm like, well, who do they get to play with, right? Who do they get touch from? Who do they get to feel loved by? And at the end of the day, I'm going to advocate for them to build up the skills for relationships, that everybody should be able to have a relationship with themselves, and everybody should have access to that release. We also help individuals explore and navigate sexual orientations and their corresponding communities. Excuse me. We do all sorts of things to affirm the queer community. And then we also, when we are working with couples or unsupported individuals, we do a lot of ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, acceptance and commitment training, depending on the scope. But a lot of people don't realize, even people who are anti-ABA, sometimes are big fans of ACT. And they don't realize that ACT is actually a behavior analytics science. And it worked its way in to psychotherapy after starting in ABA. And so ACT is a really neat approach. And we use this a lot with our couples who are having a myriad of concerns. Anything from, excuse me, I am having the hardest time with my voice today. Anything from initiation avoidance, erectile difficulty, delayed ejaculation, premature ejaculation, vaginismus and dyspareunia, anorgasmia, any of those things. We recognize that we need to check for medical factors first. Always check for medical factors. But once we have ruled out medical factors, this then becomes behavioral. And so one of the things that we can do is we can recognize that our behavior is tied to our values and it is tied to our goals. And if I can shift people's behavior away from their goals and over to their values and help them really understand why they value sex, which is different for different people. It's not my place to tell them. But if they can figure out why it is they value sex, then I'm going to have them lean on those values instead of their goals. And that's going to reduce a lot of the anxieties that are present. And we're going to learn to accept anxiety itself, what it feels like, because anxiety is actually a helpful tool. It's just sometimes it feels very unhelpful. And so we learn to harness it and to utilize it. So That all is part of behavior analysis and something that we can do in SBA. And we actually tie that into our sensate focus approach. And if you catch my last episode on here, which was all about sensate focus, then you know that sensate focus is an entirely behavioral set of procedures where a completely new way of looking at sex, we call that a new baseline, is developed with basically the idea that we're getting away from penetration, we're getting away from orgasm, we're getting away from pleasing each other, and we are just going to get down into why we're here, that value piece, and what is truly present, which is mindfulness. And again, comes back to acceptance and commitment. So being mindful of temperature, of pressure, and of texture keeps us anchored in the moment so that we can continue to accept, so that we can continue to tap into our values, so that we can really enjoy this moment. Because at the end of the day, the main reason people don't have good sex outside of medical factors is because they're too stuck in their heads to be in their bodies. So we teach them through ACT and through sensate focus as oftentimes a combined approach to move forward and to start having very valued and fun sexual experiences that don't have that pressure, that don't have the issues. And oftentimes the quote unquote sexual dysfunction, it abates, or we sometimes find a function within it. And I think that that's kind of a cool thing too. In behavior analysis, we have a stance, and this is where we differ dramatically from the other schools of therapy. We do not assess or diagnose dysfunction in behavior analysis. We recognize all behavior serves a function. Sometimes it's just serving it in the wrong context. And so we try and work with that. You're clamping down, have vaginismus or anismus, and you can't be penetrated very well. Maybe you're trying to protect yourself from something. Maybe there's some kind of trigger in this environment. We would call it a SD in behavior analysis. But maybe there's this thing that if we can shift this in the environment, and if we can learn to accept that your partner is not whoever this other person was that you're trying to protect yourself from now, right? Those are all pieces that we can bring into that present moment, that acceptance, and then we can value the experience. I do see a couple of things in the chat. I'm going to real quickly read these. Can learned sexual behaviors actually be changed? Or are we pretty much stuck with the habits we've developed over years? And I really want to throw out there that, yeah, behavior can absolutely be changed. I keep using this word shape. Shape is the gradual changing of behavior over time. Now, sometimes a behavior change is instant. I put my hand on a hot stove. I'm only doing that once. But if I have this pattern of engaging in, let's say, every time I come home, I see my partner, I want to have sex, but I know that it's probably just going to result in them telling me they have a headache. So now I'm at a point where every time I come home, I just start doom scrolling on my phone. And this has become my status quo. And now I don't even think about sex. And now my partner, who normally tells me no, has come to me and they're like, why don't you ever ask for sex? I'm like, well, I've stopped thinking about it, right? So I've actually learned over time to stop, but now I can learn over time to start again. Now that my partner has that interest or is aware that I didn't know that they had that interest. But shaping, I will say this, the longer that you've had a habit in place, the longer you need to give yourself grace for that pattern to be changed. Another question that has popped up. My partner and I seem to get caught in the same argument and the same intimacy problems over and over. Can this approach help couples break those cycles? Absolutely. What we would look at is we would look at the antecedent. What happens right before you engage in this behavior? And then we would also look at the consequence. What is it resulting in? Because the consequence is either maintaining this behavior on its own, or you have a motivation brought about by that antecedent that is not being addressed. Your motivation, your need is not being functionally met. And so we're either going to to go one of those two routes, but we're going to be able to break that pattern. That is a big part of what we do. I have a model that I use called the surviving arguments model. And in it, what I actually teach couples to do, and I make it their assignments, is to have the stupidest, most ridiculous arguments you could ever imagine. And I work with them because different people have different backgrounds and will find different things stupid and ridiculous. So I work with them and I individualize and give them these homework assignments to try and navigate using a model arguments over things like, blaming the partner for the sky being blue that day, or blaming the partner for the fact that you woke up and you could breathe through your nose and you weren't plugged up. And gosh, you think your partner stole your boogers. So like we put in these really ridiculous things because we want couples to have to approach it in a novel way. And I also want it to be reinforcing and fun and an adventure and something for the couple to go through together. And then as they learn the skill, and once they've learned the skill, we start to generalize it back towards the actual problem area. And then we start looking at real arguments that the couple has had, and we start doing them through that model, which now the couple knows and has navigated plenty. And the arguments go a completely different direction. They start moving in the direction that they always should have. At the end of the day, a couple needs conflict in order to grow, but the conflict needs to be healthy conflict. I do see one more question. Never mind. Okay. I'm going to keep moving along my slide. So we also teach couples contextual methodology, which if anybody here is familiar with psychotherapy or contextual therapy, we're using a lot of similar methodology, but we're basically teaching people to communicate with each other functionally and to recognize like what you just said, you're saying as a reaction to your dad from eons ago, because your partner in this present moment is acting as a stimulus that you have relationally framed or is reminding you of your dad. And you didn't want to marry your dad, right? So you're freaking out because just partner's reminding you of your dad. It's an awful feeling. And also your partner probably doesn't want to be anything like your dad. So we're going to try and really get to the heart of why you're responding this way. We're going to get to the heart of your partner's messaging. And we're going to make sure that both partners are able to communicate in a way that is clear, concise, and also is not going to remind the other partner too much of problematic aspects of their past. And then a big piece that we do is we help couples understand, especially when they're talking about each other in front of each other, how to highlight their strengths in their narratives, how to really point out any positives, because we get so hung up on the negatives. And you're in therapy. Obviously, you have negatives. That's why you're here. So trying to build up and look at those positives. And that doesn't mean downplaying or ignoring the negatives, but it means building up the positives. If I'm going to say that my partner did this thing last night and it upset me, I need to also be aware of anything that they did that did not upset me. And if there was anything that they did that made me feel good, well, gosh, my partner really needs to know that. It's so much more helpful for my partner to know what to do than one thing they did wrong in a specific context in the past. If I can tell them what to do, especially something that can generalize across a lot of settings or contexts, that's chef's kiss. That's good communication. And so we blend that communication training with that narrative method of reinforcement. We are also, as your clinicians, going to be pointing those out too. If you're an individual with us and you're just kind of poo-pooing on yourself, I'm going to point out anything that you did that was indicative of growth or of you using a strength. Now, something that all ASECT members, and ASECT is the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, all ASECT members have to be aware that we are not to engage in any kind of sexual touch with any of our clients, unless that sexual touch is very specifically part of our established and allowed methodologies. We don't have any established or allowed methodologies in behavior analysis for any kind of hand over hand or physical prompts or physical assists, any touch, for any pleasure-related skills. So if a couple came to me and they wanted to learn pleasure-related skills, or if an individual wanted to learn better solo sex, I am not going to manually stimulate them in any way, shape, or form. I'm not going to model or show using my body, and I'm not going to have you use your body. What I will do is bring out a model dong. I might show you different grip techniques and things like that, and you can use a model dong. Where we do have established technology is for things like hygiene. So I've helped individuals with cerebral palsy learn how to clean out their own foreskin to reduce their level of UTIs. And in order to help somebody who does have hands that are shaped much differently than ours and have different levels of articulation, in order to help him get his foreskin down, I did have to help him actually get his hand onto his penis and things like that. But again, it was not a pleasure-based skill. That was a hygiene-based skill. Okay, I'm going to move us into the history of SBA and how it has shaped itself over time. So if you've ever heard that all ABA is abuse, like if you were to look up ABA online, you're going to see it. People say all ABA is abuse. People say ABA is conversion therapy. And I, as a behavior analyst, you might think that I would be defensive of that. Actually, I am very much of the mindset that you should listen to those concerns, because without true sexological competencies, SBA work would be highly damaging. And ABA, where they are working with autistic kids and they've not been trained on autism, yeah, they're causing harm. Any modality where you are working with something and you are not well trained in it, you're going to cause harm, and it can be very abusive. We also have, in our history of behavior analysis, quite a few behavior analysts not trained in sexuality or sexology who thought that they could do the sexuality work. So let's take a look at some of that. The first is fading to increase heterosexual responsiveness in homosexuals. Barlow and Argos, 1973. They were doing conversion therapy, and actually a lot of people point out that this is one of the earliest works on conversion therapy. Treatment that they were doing made men more sexually fluid, but not heterosexual. And what they were doing was they were having these men look at images of other men having sex, gay porn basically, and then anytime they would get near an orgasm, the image would fade over into an image of a woman. And then while they were orgasming, they would literally only have images of women in front of them. And so the idea was, if we compare the orgasm with women, then they will start to become sexually aroused by women. By the end of it, some of the guys were saying, I'm a little bit more fluid. But again, they were looking more at the data. And so what they were looking at was how much they were getting erections or not. And they saw slightly more erections, but they could not get rid of the erections that were present only with men. So their idea here was, we're going to get them to be basically bi so that they have options. Then we have an experimental investigation of pre-orgasmic reconditioning and post-orgasmic deconditioning. Kantorowicz, 1978. It's almost the same study, very, very similar. And again, both of these studies are just imposing the heck out of heteronormativity. But in this one, it was really interesting. This one was, these guys were already straight, but they thought that they needed to be more of what they thought straight was. They thought that they should be quick to arousal. They should be, basically like breeding studs, ready to go. And so this was not only imposing heteronormativity, but it was also really imposing that gender construct of toxic masculinity. Now, this is the worst one. I'm going to be very honest. Full disclosure, this is not a pretty slide, and we're going to talk heavy. This was behavioral treatment of deviant sexual behaviors in a male child, Reckers and Labos, 1974. This is the seminal work. Like, this is the biggest one when it comes to the foundation of conversion therapy. Lavasse developed conversion therapy, and Lavasse was a psychotherapist and a behavior analyst. He was both, and he developed conversion therapy through behavior analytic methodology under his psychology license. He used positive reinforcement. Anytime this little kid, Kirk Andrew Murphy, he was little kid. I think he was 4 at the time of the study. He was very young. But anytime he was masculine, doing anything masculine, they were going to give him a ton of positive attention. And anytime he was acting like himself at baseline, which was rather feminine, they would ignore him. Everyone in his environment would act like he didn't exist. Whatever his need was, he's crying, he's asking for help, he's telling you that he's hurting, they would ignore him. When he acted more like a quote unquote boy, toughened up, was more gruff, used a deeper voice, didn't have feminine mannerisms, he would get a lot of attention and praise. So in essence, they basically did not get his consent for this. He was a small child, put him in an environment of punishment for anything authentic. And they shaped away all of his authentic expression until he was a mirror of what people expected of him. And he did become very much a man, a military man, a masculine role model. And then he committed suicide in 2003. And his family blames the therapy and said he was never a fully formed human after that treatment. But let's look at some positives, shall we? Because, okay, so on the positive side, we have helped with people with disabilities, and we've had help with people without disabilities. So let's look on both of these. There were couples that in 1995 were brought in, and this study, Eliminating the Battering of Women by Men, some considerations for behavior analysis. They went ahead and they basically just got heavy and made sure that all of these women who were in these settings where they were being abused could no longer be abused because there was somebody safe making sure of that, and that they could start to recognize the signs of when it was coming and choose better partners moving forward. We also have a study where they taught people with intellectual disabilities to learn to report on their staff, which is a huge issue. They've taught children how to report to their teacher that somebody has come to the schoolyard and tried to take them. They have even taught gay men in a bar to take condoms during the height of the AIDS epidemic in 1990. So it's been used in a lot of really cool ways. It's been used to help shape effective solo sex. But at the end of the day, I want to look at the harm again. Harm, it came because these individuals were not trained in human sexuality. They weren't trained in a sex positive approach, and they did not have appropriate certifications or anything demonstrable that showed that they should be doing this work. So if you're going to have somebody do this work, please make sure that they have an ASECT credential or something similar, because ASECT certified sex counselors like myself and Dr. Jeff have to have 90 hours of CE training and a bunch of other things, including a supervised practicum. My program that I developed, so any behavior analyst who's not ASECT certified, if they're certified as a CBS, a certified behavioral sexologist, they're going to have met very similar standards. They will also have completed either 60 or, if they're working with neurotypical couples, 90 hours of continuing ed, and they will have completed a supervised practicum as well. Something to avoid. There are a lot of people out there who call themselves sex therapists. Now there are a lot of people out there who are starting to call themselves sexual behavior analysts. You need to make sure they have the proper credentials. So if they only have a micro credential, I developed the SXL micro credential, so I'm not trying to poo-poo on it. But if that's all somebody has, they're coming to you and saying, I have a micro credential in this, that means they took online training, 8 to 10 hours. That's not going to be enough to do the deeper work. Also, there are organizations that have come out with very similar certifications to those put out by ASECT or by myself, and they're copycat certifications with much, much lower criteria. So please keep in mind when you are searching for somebody that you get somebody who is properly trained, and that you check out the credentials that they have and the board that they claim to be certified by. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of wrap us up on what is different between sex therapy and sexual behavior analysis. At the end of the day, it comes down to psychotherapy, because behavior analysts do not diagnose dysfunction. We do still assess and we do still look at emotional reactions, ways of thinking, and behavior patterns, but we never diagnose dysfunction. We also never delve deep into the mind. So again, behavior analysts adhere to get a cab. We always follow the assumptions of science. What we do, we avoid probing the mind. We do not unpack within sessions. So if a couple comes to us and asks us, like, we've got a lot of trauma we need to unpack, I think that's very important work, and I'm going to refer you over to a psychotherapist. We never diagnose dysfunction, and we bring tangible and experiential components into everything. There's a lot of homework if you're going to work with a sexual behavior analyst, and expect that homework to be a lot of behavioral practice, not a lot of sitting and ruminating, but a lot of doing. In sex therapy, they are looking at a pathology, at a dysfunction. And they also don't often in sex therapy have a way of tracking outside of the therapy session. So they're going to ask the clients what's going on. In behavior analysis, if you come with us, we're going to have data tracking. We're going to be taking data within the session. I use verbal behavior data, and I have a tracker AI that I get consent to use. And it helps me break down verbal behaviors that couples are engaging in so that I can get an actual quantified amount of punishment or reinforcement. We also look at what is going on between the sessions, and we have couples report on each other and share, not as tattletale, because they report together, almost like a show and tell what they've been through. But if their reports have a discrepancy, we break that down and we figure out where the data really lies. At the end of the day, who are you going to call? If your issues are surrounding intellectual disability and developmental disability, or autism with a heavy support need, level 2 or 3, the reality is you should probably be going to a behavior analyst, because most sex therapists do not have training in those populations or in how to break down sexological or sexuality-based tasks or concepts for those populations. When we get into unsupported populations, neurotypical folk or people who have a disability or a different neurotype but don't need support, they don't need staff, they're not at that level, then we can definitely help. We can help with things like perceived sex addiction, sexual dysfunction, if it is perceived as such, definitely ineffective communication and queer community needs. But the sex therapists do have a leg up on us when it comes to unresolved traumas, when it comes to dream exploration, the use of psychedelics, or tantra, because we can't go into any of that with behavior analysis. And I know some people want and need some of those things. From the client perspective, a lot of the things that we do will be methodological and very, very formulaic. Whereas if you go through a more traditional sex therapy route, it might be a little looser. It might follow your lead a bit more than following sort of a scientific pacing. And something I will note, and this is important for everybody to know, is that sex therapy is not covered by insurance. Neither is sexual behavior analysis. But psychotherapy is. And so sex therapists can bill it as psychotherapy. Behavior analysts are not able to bill psychotherapy. And so in order for us to be able to provide this service, it is typically going to be done through private pay. So a lot of us use sliding scale. My agency, we do sliding scale and pro bono. And also as behavior analysts, it's our goal to be effective. That is one of our 7 dimensions. So we try and get you in and out in 16 sessions or less. If it's going to be more than that, we consider referring out. So a parting thought. None of what I've told you is to try and sell you on my scope. It's just to make sure that you know about it. It can't solve all of the problems. Other scopes are there and they have their value. But if you do go through our treatment, it will be heavily individualized, and it'll move at a pace that is determined both by you and by the data. All right. From there, you made it. You got through this hour. And we've talked about quite a lot. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to stop my slideshow and open up to just general talking now.
Well, great. Wow, so much good information. I think it's really fascinating how you do that behavioral tracking, and really try, because sometimes it's like we're just not aware of all those behaviors in our clients too. And so really helping them see this is a repetitive behavior. This is, whatever that is, and positives or negatives with those behaviors, really looking at how can we work on all those things. So you take that data, and then how do you help the clients really understand their behaviors better from tracking and things like that?
Thank you for that. That's a great question. So I'm going to use an example that I think is like such a beautiful example. So I had this client, he comes in and he had made so many gains. And he comes in and he tells me that he's failing. He doesn't think that therapy's working because he's had such a rough, horrible last 2 weeks. So I get him into session. I ask him what's going on. He expresses to me his concerns. He tells me, he thinks we need to go back and we need to revisit a lot of stuff that we did way, way, way back. And again, I, as the scientist overseeing it, am also like looking at all the variables. And I recognize if we go way back, there's a likelihood that we're going to have to start from way back. And so I'm trying to keep him here. So I bust out his chart. I show him his graph. And he's able to see how frequently he was having issues and how infrequently he was having successes when we started. And he was able to see how great his trend lines were and how wonderful he'd been doing up until about a week and a half prior. And I was able to show him, no, this treatment's working. You've been kicking so much butt that you think now that a week and a half of struggling is a big deal.
Yeah.
That's huge, because 2 months ago, you would have been grateful to have had only 2.5 or a week and a half of struggling. Right. And so being able to look at that graph, he was like, oh my gosh, I have been kicking ass. He said, yeah, you have. You've been kicking so much ass. Do you even really need a session today? Or do you just need, maybe we just quickly figure out what it is, solution focus, figure out what to mitigate your current issue. And I'm not even going to bill you for today. He was like, really? I said, it's been 5 minutes. We can get this solved in 10. I'm not going to bill you for a 15-minute session. Let's go.
Wow.
That's where data has power.
Yeah, because it's so cool. Sometimes if you're not tracking and you're not watching, we don't really understand how much progress we've really made and where we were and where we are now. So I love that. That's such an effective way, because I know even ourselves, you'll be like, well, it doesn't seem like I've made much progress. But if you have some metrics to show you that progress, it's so helpful. Wow, that's really cool.
Thank you. One of the things that I've been doing with my clients with disabilities at the end of any of their sessions is I actually show them their charting. And I show them any of the changes that it has made. And I let them know, because a lot of my clients with disabilities are under guardianship. And I let them know, like, any of the things that your guardians think you need to work on, like, you're kicking butt, you're making your gains, and I'm going to make sure your guardian knows. And when their guardians are like, I don't think that they should have access to this, I go, well, their data says that they can handle it. And that's something that I think is very, very powerful. We've been able to get a lot of clients with disabilities access to sex and relationships, which I'm so grateful for. And then something I also saw was a couple where she could not wrap her head around the idea that she was punishing her partner. But we took verbal behavior data. I didn't even have to take it. I had AI take it, objective behavior data tracking, right? Not me. But it was able to point out that in that 45-minute session, she punished her partner over 14 times.
Wow.
Right. And so she was
Gosh,
like,
the data, you can't argue with the data, and the data is that's so amazing. Because like sometimes even we would use in Gottman and stuff, they would talk about using recordings and stuff, but people hate to be recorded. But sometimes if you showed them the behaviors or you showed them the data, like you said, it really makes you go, wow, look at me. I am really uptight. I am really, whatever. So, but what a great way, because the recording almost seems a little threatening to watch yourself. All of us are like, oh, but the data is the data, and it just gives them good information on what they're doing and not doing right. And wow, that is really cool stuff. I love it.
yeah, I had a couple that came to me. They had been in sex therapy for almost 3 years doing Sensate Focus, and I got them in, and we met all of their goals in 2 months, to the point of ejaculation and orgasm and all the happies that they were after, because I found a very clear hole in data when they were coming back and bringing back their reports. I was like, there's something missing in your reports. And it was indicative of acceptance. So again, at the end of the day, Sensate Focus is not going to work if you're not accepting. And so we pinpointed and hit that. We did a couple of days of just a bunch of small discomforts and learning to accept those, moving things askew, me going like, doing do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, but not saying the do part at the end, and leaving it hanging, just stuff like that. And once they were like, oh, that's what this is, coming back from a small discomfort. That's what has been, they were like, we've been talking about this in therapy for 3 years.
Wow.
Now I know what this actually feels like. Now I can actually do it. And they went home and they did it.
Gosh, it's very formulative. It's very pragmatic. It's very, it really figures out the problem and then gets at it. So I love that.
Thank
Very
you.
cool.
Thank you for giving me this.
I also love the whole section you talked about with like the general skills, really teaching them the skills, all the different things, because I think that sometimes just those simple things are lacking. So I think there's a lot of really excellent pieces to it, and very cool.
Thank you. And thank you again. I know that this was a dense one. I told you at onset that this might be too dense, and I was sorry.
No, you did a good job navigating it, because it was a lot to get through. And speaking of that, what I'm going to go to, and I will come back to you for your final thought for listeners, which you can think about as I do a closing centering exercise. But I am going to agree with you. But it was so great, and there was so much information that I'd like to go to where we like to go at this point in the podcast and give them some, get them back into their bodies. So as we move towards closing this conversation, I'd like to invite you to take just a minute to reflect, to breathe back into your body. Find a comfortable position, and if it's comfortable for you, gently close your eyes. Take a slow breath in through your nose and slowly exhale through your mouth. Again, breathe in curiosity and breathe out judgment. Notice that every behavior serves a purpose at some point in our lives. Rather than criticizing ourselves for our patterns, we can choose to become curious about them. Ask yourself quietly, as you continue to breathe in your nose and out your mouth, what is one pattern in my relationships or intimate life that I would like to understand with greater compassion rather than criticism? What is one pattern in my relationships or intimate life that I would like to understand with greater compassion rather than criticism? Allow that question to simply rest with you. Remember that meaningful change rarely begins with shame. It begins with awareness. It begins with curiosity, with small intentional choices practiced over time. As you take one final deep breath in Remind yourself, I am capable of learning, growing, and creating healthier patterns. Every small step I take brings me closer to the intimate life I want to live. As you move forward through your day, remember to be kind to yourself, to stay curious, and remember that intimacy begins with understanding ourselves as much as we seek to understand those we love. All right, so what is up next week on Dr. Jeff Talks About Sex and Intimacy, Vic?
Men's urologic health is about much more than urinary symptoms. It plays a vital role in overall health, quality of life, sexual function, and healthy aging. In this informative episode, Dr. Jeff welcomes Loyola Medical Center urologist Dr. Amar Farouk to present the most common urologic concerns affecting men. He will explore conditions such as enlarged prostate, urinary symptoms, prostate cancer, erectile dysfunction, urinary tract health, and lifestyle habits that can help prevent or manage these conditions. Whether you're a young adult, middle-aged, or older, this episode offers practical, evidence-based guidance to help you take charge of urologic health. Join us on July 28th at 7 p.m. Central Time to learn more.
It's going to be a great one. But this was such a good one. Oh my gosh, Nicholas, you packed so much amazing information into that talk about the sexual behavior analysis, and as well as sex therapy, and just helping people kind of navigate and figure out where might they start, where might they end up, how might these different things, these different paradigms benefit them. Such great information. So as we close out, what final word would you like to leave our listeners with about your discussion today?
I think more than anything, I'd like to just throw out there that whoever's listening to this, you're a human being. Whatever behavior maybe you feel you need to get away from, behavior is shaped. We don't choose our histories all the time, but we can choose how we respond in the present, and we can always be changing our repertoires as we move forward through life. All behavior serves a function given the right context. So rather than trying to get rid of any behavior or part of yourself, maybe just shift the context.
I love that. I love that. Gosh, it's always such a treat to have you on the podcast, and I hope you'll come back and share more wisdom with us in the future, because you just got a lot of great information to share, and it's always a treat having you here. Listeners, I just want to remind you that, as Nicholas just said, you're the author of your story. It's so hard. I know, Nicholas, I struggle with this, you struggle with this. It's hard for us not to. The suffering comes from judging what we did, how we did it, judging the behaviors. Remove the judgment. The behaviors are there. Understand them. Know where they're coming from. And then shift every moment, every day. You have the opportunity to write a different story in the present moment. So don't let the past stop you from writing this incredible moment today. Right? Yeah. So listeners, you're amazing. You're miraculous. Don't let anybody else write your story or define who you are. But we all are working on becoming our best you. And that takes some work and some help from professionals sometimes. I know my therapist is worth her weight in gold, and we all need help. So thank you for joining me, Nicholas, so much. It's so fun to have you here.
You again.
And listeners, thank you. Goodbye.
Dr. Jeff talks about sex